What I'm here to talk to you guys today about is the topic being on syllabi and reading the syllabus and that kind of thing. And a lot of people, when you say that, they're like, I know how to read a syllabus, and so I already know how to do this. But you'd be surprised at how many times the faculty are sitting around going, I don't think anybody's actually reading them, or at least not reading them the right way. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to talk to you about what I'm calling the top secret syllabus lesson, but it's not really that secret. We all tell you about it. It's just that apparently nobody's actually doing it. It must be a secret because there are some things that students are missing. So here's the idea for this presentation of what we're actually doing. So what we're going to do is we're going to talk about, I'm going to try to give you some tips. I'm going to try to show you how you should read it, how you should go through a syllabus, and what you should do at the beginning. There's a strategy for it. And I may tell you a couple of things that you already know, or I may tell you a couple of things that surprise you. So we'll talk about that and go through it. If we end a little bit early, that's fine, but you will need what I just gave to you because we're actually going to use that in a second. So do me a favor before we even start anything and just look over that really quickly. I'm going to get you to kind of skim through it. I'm going to ask you what you think. So I'm going to give you a couple minutes to do that. There's a reason for it. So just we'll skim through it, and then we'll talk about it in just a second. As you're looking at it, I'll tell you that those are sort of like my syllabi in class. You might see something like this in your classes, but what I've done is I've condensed it. So I've taken out a few things. I didn't want it to be longer than it needed to be. So I just sort of took out things and left the important stuff in. And so I want you to skim it. Let me know what you think. I'll ask you a question in a second. What do you think? Seem normal? Seem like traditional stuff you see most of the time? Okay. We're going to talk about that in just a second. But let me talk to you about your tips for a second. And then we're going to get back to this syllabus because I'm going to ask you something. And everybody said, yeah, it sounds good to me. And if you were in class, you agree, everything sounds fine? Okay. We'll talk about that in a minute. First one being, here's the thing. Your professor may not tell you this. They may not say it out loud. But the one thing that we get all the time, we get question after question after question after question. And after a while, it starts to grade it a little bit. Even if you're fine, most professors don't have a problem answering questions and they want to help and do all those things. But if you answer the same exact question over and over again, especially when, you may not be able to see this up here, this cartoon, but it's sort of become a common thing with most professors. They just go, it's in the syllabus. There are even some I know that have T-shirts that just print and they wear it on the first day. It's in the syllabus. So you need to pay attention to the syllabus. And the reason for that is, imagine if you're sitting in your classroom and you've got 100 people and you've got somebody comes up to you and says, like this one says, what did we cover in class last week? What's your late homework policy? What are your office hours? How will grades be constructed? And each time she's saying, it's in the syllabus, until finally she just gets a sign and holds it up and says it's in the syllabus. There are actually YouTube videos where you can post where you've got professors who are going crazy on YouTube where they're like, why do you keep asking me when it's in the syllabus? And part of that is if we've gone to all the trouble of constructing this, you kind of think, well, if it's there and we go over it. See, I go over it my first day of class too. So if I'm going over every policy like I'm going to do here and we're going to talk about them, and then you come up and say, okay, well, what's the attendance policy? I'm like, well, right there it was. I handed it to you on the first day of class, and I have to keep repeating it over and over again. It gets a little bit frustrating and things like that. So the thing is, you want to be able to ask questions in your classes. You just don't want to ask ones that do not bear repeating because they're already in there. So the first thing is you want to make sure when you get the syllabus to read it carefully and make sure that the question you're about to ask is not already presented in there. Tip number 2, this is the part that a lot of people don't know. This is a contract that I just handed to you. It's a contract between me to you. So when I hand this out to you in my class, I have to go by what's in here, and you also have to go by what's in here. It's a legally binding contract. So if something's in here and I'm not following it, I could get into trouble, and that's the part that I think students don't understand. They'll come to you all the time and say something like, well, can't you make an exception for me? And I'm like, but this is a contract, and if I don't do it for this person, I can't do it for you, and I can't do it for the next person. So I actually have made this little scenario so you can kind of see how that works. But if you think about it, it may be hard to see, but basically what it says is the student comes to you and says, why'd you drop me from class? Why was I dropped? I just learned that I was dropped from your class. I want to know why. And the professor says, well, because you missed 6 days of classes. And the student comes back and says, well, but I was sick those days. I couldn't be here. That's why I missed. The professor says, yeah, I understand that, but the policy in the syllabus says that once you miss 5 days, you're okay. But when you get to that 6th day, I automatically withdraw you from class. So the student then says, well, but why are you being so mean to me? How hard would it be just to make an exception and add me back into the course and just keep me in there? And so most of the time you'll get a teacher that says, it's pretty hard since the policy is clearly stated in the syllabus and I have to be fair to all students at all times. If I drop you for 6, but I add somebody back in after 6 or 7, that's not fair to you. It's not fair to them. So if it's in here, I have to go by it. And so then they turn around and say, okay, well, you're the devil. I'm calling the dean. I'm pretty mad at you for that. We get that a lot. We're the devil if we follow the policy. That's sort of a surprise most of the time, I think, to a lot of us, because we go, but it was right here the whole time. You guys should have seen it right here. And like, yeah, but you're evil, and I'm going to go talk to the dean. What will happen in those scenarios is that the dean will pull this out and go, okay, what was the policy? Oh, yeah, I see right here it says after 5 absences, you get dropped on the 6th one. Sorry, there's nothing I can do about it, because it's a contract. And a lot of students don't understand that is part of it and has to be enforced. And that goes to tip number 3. If you stay in a class, and I've given you a contract, by staying in the class, you agree to everything that's in here. Did you guys agree to everything that was in here just a second ago? Did you? So you're okay with mine? You agreed to everything. So now you have agreed to everything that's in my syllabus. Everything is fine, except for one probably key part. Look over, you can't read it up here, but look over on page 4, where I have the student responsibility statement. Maybe take a look at that real quick. Just maybe skim that student responsibility statement. See if you still agree to it after that. You're probably with me for some of it, right? You're looking at it, you're skimming, and you're going, all right, well, he says that students are responsible for their own learning. In other words, especially if this is an online class and it's a writing class, you're responsible for your, so, okay, so people are starting to see it now. You're responsible for your own learning. That's you. That's fine. You're like, that's fine. The second part is it's a cooperative learning class, so you're going to be working together in groups, whether it's online or whether it's in class. You're going to be working together in groups, helping each other. And then what's the third one say? If you look down at that one, I kind of try to make it bold here. You may not see it. It actually says, if you don't pay me $500, you're not going to stay in my class, and I have the right to withdraw you for not paying me $500. So your entire grade functions for $500. You have to pay me $500, and if you don't, you fail. You guys agreed to it. A second ago, I had you skim through it, and you're like, oh, it's fine. It's not a big deal. Now I can fail you, right? That's that's not something I actually put in my classes. As Dwayne can tell you, I don't actually stick that in my syllabi. But that is something I put in there because anything that's in here, if you don't read it and you just go, oh, I'm going to trust the teacher, they're going to put stuff in here and it's going to be fine. They could put anything in there. I mean, they could ask for your firstborn child, and you don't read it, you don't know what you agree to. So if it's a contract and I have to go by it, and you can't actually violate anything that's in there, and I have to enforce this for every student, every time, every class, you also have to make sure that you understand the policies and agree to them. And if you don't, you run into problems, right? This is a big mining area, right? That's the big mining industry around here, and so there's a lot of miners, and that's sort of what we deal with in this area. So I think mining skills come in really, really handy. And I'm going to ask you guys to help me do something, because there is a practical way that I can get you to look at all your syllabi every time. And you really should do what I'm about to do every class, but you can mine for certain things. Because if you look at this, what I just gave to you, I purposely gave you, you've got all these big long paragraphs, and you're looking at it and going, okay, there's course goals, and probably what you did when I asked you to kind of skim through it is you went, I'm not reading all that. That's a lot of stuff. I'll kind of just look at the first couple of lines maybe, and then I'll move on, because there's a lot of text on here, and you got that student responsibility statement, and you probably skim the first thing, and you're like, okay, you're responsible for your own teaching. It's a cooperative learning course. It can be very expensive to teach. No big deal. And you just kind of moved on from it. The thing is, that's how a lot of syllabi are in this, just college in general. If you don't mine through it and pick out the stuff that's important, you're going to run into something that could cause you problems. So here's what I'm going to encourage you to do. There are certain action items, what I call, because basically if you do something, if you take an action, or you don't take an action, you're going to run into problems, right? So there's certain things you should always look for. The first one being the attendance policy. You have to know what that is, because if I don't come to class or I do, whatever, I have to know when will I be dropped, how will that affect me, that kind of thing. So how many classes can I miss? Look for tardies. How if I'm tardy to class one time, is that gonna cause me problems? Grading policy, how's it actually calculated, and that way you know what's the big assignments. If there's going to be certain essays that are worth more points, I know I need to focus really hard on those. We're going to come back to all those. The reason I'm going to tell you about this in a minute, I'm going to ask you guys to help me fill in some of this. So you're going to use the paper that you got in front of you, and we're just going to fill it in, and you can see how that works. The class environment. So is there anything that I have to know if it's an in-class type of course? Anything I need to know about, can I bring drinks in? Can I bring food in? How are cell phone policies done? How's the class going to be set up? Is it going to be all discussion? Is it going to be lecture? How's it going to be? Late policy. So can I turn in work late? Some teachers will say you can't turn in late at all. And if you turn in a paper late, too bad, it's a 0. Some people will say you've got this amount of time to do it, and if you don't turn it in that amount of time, sorry, it stays a 0. You need to know what that is up front. Basic course info, like is there a textbook, what materials do I need to bring to class, things like that. And then miscellaneous information, that's going to be really important in a second because I'm going to ask you for that. Anything that I could possibly need to know that if I don't do something or I do something incorrectly could cause me problems in the course. So let's fill this in really quickly. You guys tell me, what's my attendance policy in this particular syllabus? So you're skimming through it, you're looking for it. What's the attendance policy? True. So what's the action item there? How am I going to actually run the attendance policy if you don't come to class or whatnot? For how much? So you're going to lose 3 points if what? You're on it. You're almost there. For each absence after what? Yeah. So you've got so many absences that you can take, right? So if you look on page 2, you'll see it there at the top. It says after that first thing, first paragraph you can look off for a minute, but then if you look at the second one, it says right there, you're allowed 3 absences during the semester. No differences between excused or unexcused. So sometimes people come and they say, well, I've got a doctor's note. Excuse me. Well, but I can't because I've got to say the same amount of students have to be here the same amount of time. I can't just say you're fine for not coming. And then after that, do I drop you? No, you just lose 3 points off your final grade. But that's important because if you didn't know that, you missed 4, you just lost 3 points off final grade. You missed 5 or 6 or 7 days, you just lost a letter grade. So that's important. What about the tardies? What did I put on there on the tardies? Yeah. If you come in 10 minutes late 4 times, that's an absence because you pretty much missed the whole class at that point. So there it is. So you could put the attendance policy and you could say, okay, what's this person's attendance policy? Okay, well I can miss 3 days. After that I lose 3 points. Here's the tardy. What about grading policy? Do you guys see the grading policy? It's oversimplistic for this purpose, but what's the grading policy for what I've given you right now? Like how would you be graded? Yep, so you got 50% of your grade coming from 4 essays, right? So half your class grade comes from the essays that we do in 4 different units. Then you've got in-class essays. So you know that any work I do in class or homework assignments, smaller assignments, come from 30%. And then my participation in class, working together and discussing and doing things, that's 20%. That's important because if I don't show up to class or I don't actually talk, like if I sit quietly in class, I'm going to lose some points on that. So I've got to know I've got to be able to do this. Even if it's awkward for me, I've got to be able to do that. Class environment, I said things like, okay, cell phone use, drinks, will there be discussions or will there be lectures? What do you guys think just by looking at it? Where would you find that? Last page. What do you got on the last page? Yeah, so you got silent cell phones. That's one. Yeah, no, don't use computers while I'm talking. Yeah, that's important. What else? Because we are in computer labs in my classes. We're in computer labs. What about drinks? If it's if you got a lid to it, because basically that policy is because I don't want people knocking over their drinks and spilling on the computers and everything like that. And then what about? Do you think it's going to be a discussion type class, a lecture class? What do you think it's going to be from it based on that? You got some lecture, but what do you got? What else? I'll say with what I've got in here in particular, you've got, it's going to be, I'm okay with drinks with the lid. You've got group work, lecture, discussion. You got different things. You got to silence your cell phones. Those things are important, so you got that on there. What's my late policy? Simple. I've got you mining through it. Yeah, see. So if you don't turn in your paper or you don't turn in your assignment, what happens? Yeah, you're on the right track. Okay, so that's important, right? So what you've got is you've got an attendance policy. It's okay. If you can't turn in your work, it's okay. You don't turn in on the day it's due. You're fine. But what happens after that? Well, you've got up to a week to turn it in. After a week, I can't accept it anymore. That's important because if you don't know that and you're 8 days late on something, it's a 0 no matter what. And then after that, though, you're losing 10% every day, which means you're going to lose a letter grade. So next, you turn it in 3 days late, you just lost 30% right there. So you know it's okay. You can turn in a day or two late, but you're going to lose points. So that's how that one goes. And then the basic course info, I won't make you tell, but that's usually pretty easy to find for most people. You can look on the first page, and you're going to see all my information, like where my office hours and things like that. The required class materials are right there too. So do I require a textbook? Yeah, it's right there. What do you need to bring with you all the time? That kind of thing will be in there. What about this miscellaneous information, though? When you guys were looking through it just now, did you see anything that I didn't mention that would be an action item? So something that if you don't do it or you do it, you're going to get into trouble. Plagiarism, okay, so if you plagiarize, what happens? See, it's a big paragraph, right? There's a big long thing in there. See? You see my point. What you just do, you're like, oh my gosh, there's so much paragraph here. And you just start reading. You automatically fail the class. So if you plagiarize, you'd be surprised how many times somebody comes in and plagiarizes the paper and then goes, but wait, could you just let me do it over? This says you're going to fail the class. So it automatically shows up in here that I go, I don't have a choice. First of all, you shouldn't have plagiarized. We talk about that. But second of all, if you do it, this is the result, and there's no way around it. This is what I have to do. I have to sit with meeting all the time with students and say, this is what it says. And when they say, but please, I just didn't understand or whatever, I go, this is my policy, and I just show it to them. This is all I can do. It's in there. So that's one. Plagiarism is a big one. Yep, that's one. That's an action item. There's maybe 3 other ones, if you were guessing what. Let me see what you think it might be. The goals. The goals are important because the goals, those are more standardized, but that is important because it tells you what you will do in the class. Yeah. What else? Yes, that's very important. So if you're repeating the class, so let's say you took Dr. Arnold for English, you failed. You come into my class and you say, I'm just trying with a new instructor, I want to try to work with that. I'm just going to turn in, it's the same first essay as the narrative essay, so I'm just going to turn that in. A lot of times they do that, but they don't read this. Guess what you get? What do you get? You get a 0, yeah. So you get a 0 on that one because you have to turn in new work every time. That is important. If that wasn't in here or you didn't see it, that would be, so that's a big one. What else? There's one really important one. Towards the beginning, it's on like page 1 going into page 2. Yeah, look in that paragraph and tell me what happens with how it works. I mean, just sort of skim through that and tell me what's the action item. So what could happen to you? To give you some idea while you're reading that, this particular syllabus is for 2 classes. There are 2 classes that are co-enrolled together. So if you got 2 different classes, you get 2 different grades. But what could happen in these 2 classes? Yeah? Well, what happens? Yeah? Okay, so you're doing research papers, stuff like that. But what's the action item in that one? Yes. Yeah. Imagine you didn't see that, right? And you have an A in English 111. And at the end of the semester, you don't ask questions about that. But for some reason, you failed the ENF3 part of it. And you go, well, okay, well, I passed English 111, but I failed ENF3. No, the state, not me, the state says, you fail ENF3, you fail English 111. And I have to tell students when they say, why? I say, well, because there's no way to separate the 2 classes. ENF3 is not offered by itself. So you can only take it with English 111. Which means if you don't read that section and you don't know that, that's probably going to get you in trouble later. So that's why that's so important. I'm trying to think if there's anything else in that I wanted to. That's important, yeah, because a lot of people don't read that or they don't know that they can actually get accommodations. Yeah, it's important. Look at the very last page, very last paragraph. What happens if maybe you have a rough day in class and something happens where you disrupt class a lot? What happens to you? I can just say leave the classroom, and then. But what's the policy on it? If you leave the classroom, how many times? 2. So if I have to remove you twice, basically that never happens, never even once. But if that happens twice because something does happen, you're automatically withdrawn from the class. That's important because if you come in and you're just like arguing with somebody else and I can't get you to calm down, it's never happened. But if that happens, you get withdrawn. So those are 4 action items that are really important because this thing's not all of a sudden. That's really important because if you don't know that and you come into class and something bad happens, you get withdrawn and you're asking, well, why did you withdraw me? Well, that's why. Which leads to tip number 5, by the way. Believe it or not, you can actually ask us questions. We are not the grand and powerful Wizard of Oz, so we don't expect that you're never going to say anything to us, you're never going to ask us questions. If this is a contract and you were required to do all the things I just asked you to do, including the $500, by the way, I've actually put that in there before. And then, of course, you have to amend it later and say, okay, I'm taking that out. But I've actually put that in there before just to see if anybody caught it, just like you guys. Like, so for the first day of class, you walk in, you say, I want you to read the syllabus. Let's talk about it. They go through it. I even point them out and say, how do you feel about the student responsibility statement? And they go, it's good. I agree. It's fine. I think it's a good idea. And you're like, well, you just agreed to pay me $500. So I'll take that in cash next week. But it is something that if you don't read it, but somebody should come up and they should have said, wait a minute, wait, I just want to ask you a question. Why do I owe you $500 for taking this class? I think that's illegal, by the way. You're not allowed to do that. And that would be fine. I would actually be happy about that. But that means they paid attention and they read it. We actually appreciate when people come up and they ask questions and they say, well, you know, this statement here about only missing 3 days, why do you do that? Why is your policy 3 days and not more than that? And I'm happy to talk to them about it. And I explain to them, here's why. We have these workshops, and here's how it's all set up. Happy to do that. It's actually a good thing if you do it the right way. Don't walk up and be like, you're stupid and your whole syllabus is stupid, and I just want you to know that, because that's going to be... If there was a tip 6 would say, don't insult your professor. That's a really bad idea. But if you walk up and you say, listen, I just wanted to clarify a quick question. I see your grading policy is this, and I just wanted to ask you about it. We're happy to talk about that. And then you can just sort of, even if you disagree with it, you can talk about it. And then guess what? If at the end of the day, you look at a policy in here and you go, you know what? I can't, there's no way I can handle this policy. I absolutely can't do it, and the teacher's not going to change their mind. This is how it is. There are other sections for most classes, so that's when you would say, all right, well, let me just see if I can switch into a different section because the policies are in here, and that's the contract. Don't agree to a contract that you're not willing to actually follow. So that's that part. Let's see. And sort of to wrap that piece up, this is a quote from an actual famous educator who it makes a lot of sense when you think about it. It says, you're in college now, act like it. If you don't pay attention to the syllabus and mess up as a result, well, it's on you. And so in other words, this is college, and you know, in high school, I think a lot of people get handheld a little bit. You guys know this because you came to this, and usually people who come to this are willing to actually come. It's at 8:45 in the morning, so it's very early. So I appreciate you coming. But the thing is, people don't really understand that it is on you. Yeah, and if you don't actually do it, if you don't actually do what the syllabus tells you to do, or you don't read it, you don't get to come up and go, oh, well, I didn't know that was in there. Can we just pretend like that never happened? That's that precious snowflake syndrome, right? Where you're like, you are not more important than the person sitting next to you. This is the same way for everybody. And if you think about it, how mad would you be? I mean, just think about this, like with my late policy. How mad would you be if you worked your butt off? I mean, absolutely worked yourself to death one night. Stayed up all night, got the paper in on time. And then the next day you found out, okay, well, I got a B on that paper. Somebody else in the class was like 4 days late. And then all of a sudden, they got an A. See? You're going to be like, wait a minute, why is that fair? Because I could have just came up and said, I'm going to be late, and then there's no, I got an A on it? Are you kidding me? Yes, that's what I'm saying. So, which, by the way, I will tell you this, I'm not, this is, like I said, this is a contract. So if it's in here, I can't break it. And so you need, you know, something comes up in here and they're not following. You can say, well, look, this is don't go up to them and go, hey, you're a terrible teacher, you're wrong completely. But this is what's in this, and I just wanted to ask you about it because this is what is actually in the policy, and I wanted to know why that didn't happen to me or whatever. They may explain it that either you misunderstood the policy or something else, or maybe you're right, and they actually have to change what's actually happening. But that's exactly how it should be. My thought process is, if I've got the policies in here, there's a reason for them. And I've got to be fair for everybody. And you guys obviously agree with that because you all just went, absolutely, do that. Yes. And if there's not a policy in here, people can, especially, because if I didn't have a late policy in here, you just turn in stuff whenever you feel like it, right? And what would be the point of that? Before I had a late policy, I'll tell you this story. When I first started teaching, I didn't have a late policy. So what happened? I had a student at the very end of the class showed up with every paper, all 4 papers at the very end. And I was like, no, I can't accept that. And he's like, there's no policy. I was like, you're right. It hurts me a little bit. I'm like, you got me. I can't do anything about that. So what I have to do, I had to grade them. I didn't have a choice. So I graded every one of those papers at the last minute, even though the point of an English class is to grade as you go and sort of get better each piece. He didn't get anything out of that. I didn't have a choice, though. It wasn't in here. So you better believe the next semester, late policy, right here. There's a late policy in there. And there's a lot of things, too, like when you look at the attendance statement. I share this story sometimes, but I actually had a student one time. I'll just share this real quick and I'll be done. I had a student one time come to me missed a bunch of classes. Attendance policy wasn't as clear as it is now. Missed a bunch of classes, and I was willing to work with that student. And I said, I'll help you do whatever, because what she did is she said I was just falling behind, I was struggling, and I have a hard home life and all this. Dwayne may have heard this story before. But what happened in the end, she ended up stopped coming. I was tutoring her, I was in my office, she stopped coming to it at all. I said, I don't know what's going on. I called her, I emailed her, couldn't get a hold of her. Finally, she comes back, and she says, I've been out for a while because my mother passed away. And she's the only person I have in my life. I don't have any friends or family. She's the only person I have in my entire life. I said, that's terrible. I feel absolutely awful about it. Of course, I'll help you. I mean, it's one of those things that whatever I can do to help. I was talking with the dean. It wasn't here. It was in Kentucky. I was talking with the dean about it, and the dean at the time, a very nice person, said, why don't we send some flowers? I said, that's very nice. Send some flowers, say we're very sorry that this happened to you. 2 days later, after the flowers arrived, a woman came into my office carrying the flowers. She said, I want to know why you're sending my daughter flowers like this. And I said, wait, what do you mean your daughter is sending flowers? You can't say you're supposed to be dead, right? You're not supposed to be alive right now. You can't say that. So as we get to talking about it, obviously she had made all that up about her mom, basically killed her off. The funny thing about the end of that story is I actually had a meeting with the dean where the dean was like, well, okay, we're going to catch her. So he brought her in, set her down right in front of him. The mom hid behind the door, the office door, and listened the whole time. She was a funny mom. She listened the whole time, and here's the dean going through the paces. How's it been for you? How'd she die? What happened to her? And there's the daughter explaining how she killed off her mom. Behind the door is the mom. Now the mom comes flying out, grabs her. I thought there was going to be a murder. I thought that was just going to, I'm like, I don't know how to write this up. There's no way, I don't know what the policy is for that. There's nothing in my syllabus for like if your mom kills you in front of me, what do I do about it? So, yeah. So basically, my point is this. Think about this, Professor. When they make up these things, there's a reason for it. We have these experiences that you may not know about, and they may not seem fair, but they're in there for a reason. That's one of them, because I learned after that, okay, maybe we can't automatically just agree with everything everybody says. But that's something that after that I was like, I got to have a policy, and the dean told me then, you've got to balance fairness with having compassion too. So understand, but then know there's some there's got to be some sort of policy behind it. That's why that's in there. So if you don't agree with it, you can talk to them. You can actually ask them questions. But make sure you read it, and if you don't read it, just know you've agreed to everything that's in there. So when the end of the semester comes, that's on you if something happens and you didn't know about it. You say, well, I didn't know it was there. That's on you. Okay. We're a little bit early, but I will go ahead and end. You guys got any questions for me about anything or whatnot? I appreciate you guys coming. Like I said, I know it's 8:45 and it's tough to get up and come, but I appreciate you guys coming. Have a good rest of the week. Okay, well that's good. See, that worked out for you then. But yeah, it could be. Some people we worry with 8:45. We worry that's a tough time to come into. Thank you guys. I appreciate it.